Welcome back. So we're just looking at Cattleya labiata by Harrisoniana, which has just opened up this week with 5 blooms on it. Very nice. Primary hybrid. And interesting to note the similarities of that one with this one over here, which is another primary hybrid. This one is Luteola by Mossier. So another little box has made itself to my premise, and it's another orchid haul, of course, this time from Akerne Orchids in Brazil. Belgium, I should say. That's wishful thinking, isn't it? Brazil, in Belgium. So let's open this one up and have a look. Alright, so I always like to start with the small ones first, and this one is Catlleya, or also known as Catlleya mariae. So this is in the Cattleya alliance. Very nice species from Mexico. I think it's intermediate growing. There's another plant that's closely related, which is citrina, Catlleya citrina. That's the yellow one. This one is green and white. Reputedly fairly easy to grow, but this is quite a small little seedling, so I think I'll be waiting for a few years to see any blooms on this one. And this next one is a little Neophinaceae, also a very small seedling, I suppose, also known as Vanda these days, falcata. So that's the samurai orchid from Japan, and this is a very special cultivar. Shuteno is the name of the cultivar by siblings. So this one has some purple colouring in it, which is very nice. And this is to replace a plant which I lost during the renovation. That was a much larger plant than this one, unfortunately. But yeah, I had some plants in the garden, and I thought I had moved them all away, but apparently that one got left behind, and when they did the renovation they dug a very big and very deep hole, much bigger than what I was imagining, and at some point I saw a little orchid had fallen into the hole. Well, it was sort of, I don't know, I gave up on it. I guess I could have rescued it, but for some reason I just didn't get around to it during all the chaos of the renovation. So this is the replacement, so I'll be starting again from a very small plant, but on the positive side, I did feel like I was starting to get better at the culture of these Neophinaceae, so hopefully I can apply that to this one and get it growing nicely. Alright, so this next one is something different. It's not an orchid at all, it's actually a bromeliad, and I'm quite excited about this one. It's a very large, tall growing bromeliad, and a very beautiful one as well, I think. So bromeliads are, yeah, in my experience, I'd say they're easier to grow than most orchids. They do need a lot of light though, so if you need to have a very sunny position for them, they grow high up in trees, and yeah, fairly occasional watering. Just water them into the center of the plant. Small dose of water is enough, once a week or so, and that's plenty. At least that's my experience with some other bromeliads. But yeah, I'm really excited about this one. It's a very, very unusual plant, and like I say, it grows pretty big, so it'd be a nice specimen plant in time, hopefully. Bilbergia is the name of the species. Right, and this last one is a larger plant. It's a catlleya, you probably guessed, a primary hybrid of Tenebrosa and Leopoldii, which is also known as Tigrina. Leopold, I guess, named after the Belgian King Leopold, and Akerne coming from Belgium. They probably prefer to use that name, I suppose, but I think it's generally accepted as Tigrinum these days. But this is a beautiful hybrid, if the photos are anything to go by, and this is a good size plant. Should be coming into flowering size looks a bit dehydrated at the moment, but I think if, yeah, well, certainly with the warm weather coming on and good light and good watering, it should be possible to plump those pseudo bulbs up. And yeah, I guess we'll be looking for some growth, some new growth. Is that, oh yeah, there it is there. That's the new growth there. I can focus on that. Yeah, so yeah, just plump it up with a good watering and good sun, and it should be ready to flower, hopefully maybe this year or next year. Good size plant. So there we have it, two larger plants and two little seedlings. That's the haul. It's just a small haul this time from Akerne, but yeah, thank you Akerne for providing these plants. I think they're pretty nice plants, especially I like the bromeliad. I think that's going to be a really nice plant, and hopefully that larger catlleya, I can get that going. And the two little seedlings, I guess, will be longer term projects, but really nice nonetheless, especially that Neophinacia fulcata is a very rare, in Europe at least. You don't see those ones with those colourings too often, and that's quite a reasonable price, I think €15 or something like that. So this is the Bilbergia, the bromeliad, with a bit of daylight shining on it, so you can see the beautiful patterns and colorations on that. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this plant in the collection, and this is just a little baby. I think it's about 30 centimeters high, but I think it can grow over a meter, perhaps up to close to 1.5 meters high, but quite narrow, very upright habit from the photos that I've seen. And yeah, so the trick with these bromeliads, what I've experienced over the years anyway, is to not water the bottom. Don't water the medium, that's just there to hold the plant in place. Water into the centre, into the bract, and don't overwater them because they don't like that either. So just occasional watering, lots of sun, and it should be fine hopefully. But yeah, really looking forward to growing this into a nice house plant. And yeah, just to take another look at this catlleya here, which just arrived. So the media has got moss on it, so I think it's breaking down, and that's might be why the pseudo bulbs are looking kind of shriveled. So I think I'm going to do an emergency repot on this one, although it does have a bit of root growth. Probably not the perfect time for it, but we're still in spring, so I think still should be okay. Okay, so this is the catlleya now. I've taken it out of its pot, and the media, it's not too badly broken down. It does have a fair bit of moss growing on it, but one of the things that I noticed is that all of the roots that were in the pot were dead. So just judging by the amount of moss that's on the media, I suspect that it's been grown in a very humid environment, and the roots then prefer to grow outside of the pot. Within the pot it hasn't been drying off enough, and then the roots tend to rot away, and that's one of the reasons why with a lot of my cattleyas now I'm switching to these pots, the holy pots. There's a lot of different ways of doing it, but so this is one example. This is an aquatic plant pot. I find they do quite well. This is one that I got last year, which didn't have any roots, and you can see that that's coming along quite well. And the advantage of this is it enables the roots within the pot to get fully aerated, and I think a lot of the cattleyas really like this. So I've tried lots of different approaches with the cattleyas, and they're not all the same. Some prefer more moisture, some prefer to dry out faster, and so forth. But I think this is a good compromise. I guess the only downside to this approach is that in the winter, sorry, in the summer, you do need to be watering them very often, every couple of days. But in the winter it works really well, once a week. Let them dry out in between waterings. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind, I guess. Alright, so yeah, the other thing to mention, I guess, when you're using these aerated pots, the aquatic pots, it's a good idea to use a larger pot than you would otherwise use, because it is going to dry off much faster. But there is an advantage of that because it allows the roots to wander more freely through the medium. Especially these cattleyas have quite extensive root systems. So yeah, I think that's another advantage. You can have a larger pot for the same plant. So I'm going to go from this size pot up to this, so you can see that's a much larger pot in terms of volume. That would be probably more than double the volume. And I also like to put some pebbles in there as well as bark. That's my preferred combination. So the next problem is how to get the plant into the pot. You can see that one of the roots is sticking out there. There's quite a lot of new roots around the top of the old pot there that are growing, and this root that's sticking out here is actually broken, so I'm just going to cut that off just at the point there where it's broken. Yeah, it's a bit hard to do this with one hand, but then we're going to pop it in here like this and try to get all the roots into the pot. That's what I'll do, and then start putting bark in there. The other thing I do before putting it into the new potting mix is just rinse it off with a bit of water, just to get all that old decomposing media, as much of it off as possible. Just swirl it around like that. Alright, so that's it. It's in its new pot. So you can see it's a much bigger pot than what it was, which is kind of counterintuitive. I was always trying to underpot the cattleyas, but then I had problems with plants just growing out of the pot. Maybe I can show you an example. This one here. So all the roots start growing out of the pot, and I've got many more examples of that. So I think now I'm trying to use another example here. So, you can see the roots there, and it's kind of hard to keep those roots alive once they grow outside of the pot. So with this approach, I'm giving the plant much more medium to work with, but very well aerated medium, and hopefully this is getting closer to simulating the epiphytic environment. I guess mounted would be the best, but then the amount of watering that's required is quite onerous, especially in the summer, looking at watering multiple times a day. So I think this is a good practical approach. At least it's working pretty well for me. So this is a unifoliate catlleya hybrid from last autumn. I think I got it and potted it up, and didn't have any roots on it at all. It was a Brazilian import, but you know, when the plant's got nice big pseudo bulbs, that'll be enough for it to push out new growth, new roots. And this plant is not as juicy as that one, but it is pushing out a new growth, and it does have some viable roots on it, so that's a good starting point. The other thing, of course, is on your tag, well, this is how I do it anyway, just mark there the month and the year, and the R indicates that it's been repotted, so then I'll know. It's impossible to remember these things, so just put it onto the tag for future reference. Alright, so there it is. It's potted up. It's being suspended, so lots and lots of airflow here out in the greenhouse. Obviously, if you're growing within the home, then yeah, even better, I would say, to use this method, because it's really all about getting airflow into the roots. So I would also use this indoors, I think, especially for larger plants that tend to stay wet for longer, the medium. I think this approach can help, but yeah, I'm trying a lot of other approaches as well at the same time. I don't put all my bets onto one horse, and I know a lot of people are doing all different ways of doing it, but I thought I'll just show you how I do it. And yeah, I had a lot of cattleyas flowering for the first time last year, and I think I'll have a lot more again this year, so it does seem to be working pretty well.